Good morning. This is Richard Cheng. I'm your host for the Sativa Segment. We are recording episode 11. Before we get started, as usual, I'd like to say that this episode is fueled by Dads at Peace. It's a men's resource center based here in Dallas, Texas. If you want to find out more about it, go to Facebook, and there's a Facebook page for Dads at Peace. Today we have a guest. His name is Andrew Escamilla from Herring Bank. Right, Andrew?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, Herring Bank. Tell me a little bit about Herring Bank. We met a few years ago, but when we met, it was at a conference, and I had never heard of Herring Bank, right? And you came up to me along with some of your other coworkers, and we just started talking, created some dialogue, and off we went, developed a relationship.
Yeah, that was kind of the beginning stages of the hemp industry. It was back in 2019. I think it was the Lucky Leaf Expo in Dallas.
Which is funny because I'm actually going to Lucky Leaf next month to speak in Mississippi.
Okay.
Yeah. So brings me back full circle for when you and I met.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've been involved in several of the Lucky Leafs in Texas and even out of state. And so, it's just brought a lot of tremendous opportunity and exposure. Just to let people know about who we are and what we can do for them here in the industry. And so a little bit about Herring Bank. We're actually a very old community-sized bank based here in Texas. We were founded in 1899 by Colonel C.T. Herring, who was a rancher, a farmer, and also built a lot of hotels out in West Texas. It started in Vernon originally, and now that they have
That's in West Texas, isn't it?
It is.
Vernon, Texas? I used to drive through that when I lived out in West Texas.
Yeah, it is Texas country town out there. I visit every now and then. And so, I mean, it's been family owned ever since. And, they've just really been open to the opportunity to work in this industry, which is, it's a very interesting position for me to be in, and I really enjoy what I do.
Okay, so how long have you been at Herring Bank?
I've been at Herring Bank for almost 5 years now. I've had banking experience previous to that, but originally I came in at the Grand Prairie branch as the customer service manager, just kind of managing the operations, sales and everything that goes on in the building is what my responsibility was. Got
it. So Herring Bank obviously has some tradition, the legacy goes back to Vernon, West Texas, and small community bank, right? And suddenly you join and you decide to get into the cannabis industry. Tell me about that process and how the bank decided to just dive into the cannabis industry.
Well, I think the leadership of the bank saw it as just so much potential and a growing opportunity. As the Farm Bill passed, the 2018 U.S. Agricultural Improvement Act in 2018, 2019, I mean, everybody's talking about the industry and how they can get involved. And really, our bank was open to it, and we were attending expos, making a lot of connections. But really building that bridge of how do you bank this industry was a process because it was all new. And so we embraced the opportunity. I remember having meetings we started in April of 2019. So shortly after the Farm Bill passed, we had already decided we were going to participate in it. And so we were having meetings about what is hemp, what is CBD, cannabis in general. And for me, that was all new. Right. And so it was a learning experience just to understand what this industry was that was coming not just to Texas, but to the United States.
I remember meeting you, I guess, shortly after you guys got into it. It was around September or October of 2019. And I don't know if you recall, but we met at a Starbucks. And then shortly after that, I had a chance to speak with your compliance people within Herring Bank. And just talking to them made me realize how many resources that banks like Herring they're dedicating towards compliance and really dedicating the time and the expertise to understand the system and to do it right. So, I mean, with that said, it sounds like your bank has certain protocols, certain processes. Has anything really jumped out at you and said, "Oh, I'm surprised that we're willing to do that"?
I mean, since the beginning, we've been very open to the industry. As you said, compliance is a big part of any bank that you are a part of, regulations federally. So we don't work in the industry, but we work directly with the industry and kind of building the bridge between the requirements of CBD and hemp, the legalization on a federal level and a state level, because state has their own regulations, and then the banking regulations that we have to follow, and how do we make those two work together. And so that's what I'm very proud of with our program and our team, is that we have people that have worked with the industry for many years or in the industry. And so we stay very knowledgeable with the folks that we deal with.
Okay. And we'll circle back to your bank because I do want to ask you more, but really I want to get to know you a little bit more as well, because I know we've known each other for a while, but tell me about how you got into banking and where you're from and your educational background.
Okay. Well, a little bit about me. So I've lived in Dallas all my life. I'm actually from Oak Cliff.
Okay.
That's my hood. That's where I'm from. And a little bit of background, how I got into banking. Well, I've always been involved in sales to some aspect. I've worked with, I like working with people, but I have a very diverse work experience. So in the very beginning, I had this entrepreneurial idea that came from my father about mowing lawns in the neighborhood when I was 14. And so I wanted to buy Jordans and Nikes and things that, were just overpriced that we couldn't afford as a family. So I would push my lawnmower and build my customer base and just earn some cash and spend it all on stuff. Yeah. And, I had about 9 or 10 clients that I would go to on a regular basis. And,
I did something similar when I was about that age. So I had my own lawn mowing clients
Did you?
Yeah.
That's awesome. It's such smart money because when you're that young, you're looking for opportunities. And, it's hot in the summer. People's grass is hot. They don't want to go outside or they don't have a lawnmower, and you come at the right opportunity. Mm-hmm. And I took advantage of that.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't fun mowing in 100-degree weather, right? But when you're 14, 15 and, you just want to make a buck, I think I charged maybe $20 for a small lawn, 25 for a larger one. I think 27 for a corner one. I don't know what you did, but it's not bad.
Yeah.
When you're 14, 15 years old. So you had a little bit of an entrepreneurial spirit. How did you transition into banking? Where was your first opportunity in banking?
Well, years later, I was working part-time. This is a funny story, in retail clothing sales, or not really even sales. I was just, I worked for Banana Republic and I was in the stockroom.
Okay.
And so the way I got into banking was I sold a pair of shoes to a lady. So I saw this, she's a friend of mine now, her name's Alina. And so she was walking around looking for a pair of men's shoes. And so, normally I just handle the back room and stock checks and filling clothing that needs to be put out. And so I just said, hey, do you need some help? And she needed some men's shoes. So I went back and forth and just helped her out. Mm-hmm. And so she said, oh, well, actually, she's like, I'm a manager of a bank at Compass Bank. She's like, here's my card. I'd like to hire you as a teller. And I was just like, she's like, I love your customer service. You're very friendly. I'd like you to come work for me. And I just thought, okay, well, what does a teller do? I didn't know anything about banking or this bank. And so it just kind of led to, her interviewing me and me getting hired as a teller back in 2007. So that's when my banking career started, just as a teller in the local branch.
Well, you never know who you're going to find at Banana Republic, right?
You never know. Yeah. So I got into banking by selling a pair of men's shoes.
Hey, weirder things have happened, right? So you get into banking and you join Herring Bank about 5 years ago. Now let's really talk about how, the transition into cannabis, and let's really dig a little bit deeper. Do you know the dialogue and really kind of the backroom conversations about the decision to get into cannabis and how that decision was made?
I get asked that question sometimes. I mean, I wasn't in the back room, but I know that our bank they saw this as an opportunity. They saw the long picture, I guess you could say. And, before banks were advertising, before banks were going to expos, we were one of the first ones to really focus on the CBD and hemp industry. But
there had to been some resistance internally because it is an industry that had been historically stigmatized, right? Yeah. And then you have the 2018 Farm Bill that passed, and that kind of opened up the floodgates for a lot of banks. But were there any internal politics that you can talk about? I know that, obviously you're an employee of Herring Bank, but were there any internal resistance, like, hey, this is a little bit too risky, or we talked to this bank and these are some of their challenges? Can you talk about a little bit about some of those discussions?
Well, I'm sure folks had their reservations. Me myself, not really understanding the industry. I thought, well, CBD, I guess everyone's getting high, and I really didn't understand what it was. And so that's why they really worked to put out really good information at the very beginning, understanding what hemp was, how it was legalized, how we saw this as an opportunity. We saw it for an opportunity to grow our customers. I mean, our slogan is relationships for a lifetime. And so, really educating internally what just happened, what the hemp industry was, why we were getting into it, really building relationships and seeing that being part of the future. A new industry that started and us wanting to take advantage of it. I mean, really be in the forefront of it.
Now, help me understand how banks track and file the SARs and what triggers it. Tell us a little bit about that, because I'm sure there are listeners out there who really, they're not aware of some of the challenges that banks have, which banks are super regulated, right? And you do have certain obligations to the Department of Treasury to file certain filings if you do encounter something that may deem as suspicious. Tell us a little bit about that process, if you can.
Well, I think that affects just any business in general as far as banking. I mean, the same standards are going to go for any bank and any industry. With cannabis, there's the full cannabis side, which we have analysts that will oversee activity and just make sure we're in compliance with federal guidelines on how we need to do that. So that it's more intensive on the full cannabis side. On my side, because it's been federally legalized, it's not as monitoring. Not as many reporting, I guess you could say. But we still monitor things like licensing, lab tests. That's something that I look at almost every day.
You're talking about the COAs that's produced by the labs?
Yes, the certificate of analysis, because in reality, the only thing that makes hemp different or makes it federally legal is the 0.30% THC on a dry weight scale. So one of the things that we look for in working with customers is transparency. And so we look for what products are they selling, what's the nature of their business, who are they selling it to, how are they selling, and do they have a lab test to show that their products are compliant on a federal and a state level. And so, we understand that if a customer is able to be transparent with us, then they're able to be transparent with their own customers who are buying their products, crops, whatever it is. If a customer doesn't have lab tests or isn't getting their license requirement, we can't do business with them, because we're really trying to work with the industry to stay within the guidelines, both federally and on state level.
So I guess let's walk through the process. Okay. Customer walks in. Andrew, I own, a CBD shop, whatever hemp business that they own. I would like to get lending. I would like to open up an account. I would like to open up a line of credit. Is that a yes to all three, depending on what you find? Walk me through the due diligence process for a client, and what are some of the typical questions you pepper them with?
So typically, and it's a little bit differently because I have customers now, not just in Texas, but in about 30 states. So most of the time it starts with an email or a phone call. And, we'll kind of interview the customer, find out the nature of their business, introduce our bank, what we do. And really, it's more of a get to know. One thing in banking is you need to know your customer, know who they are, know what they're doing. And so there's an initial interview and finding out just who they are, what they do, hearing their story. And I always appreciate having those conversations. It's not just like a banking, drilling them. It's just really trying to find out what they're doing in the business. And so, certain questions I'll ask, are you a retail shop? Are you e-commerce? Are you a manufacturer? Are you a farmer? What do they do? I mean, we have customers from farmers to retailers and everything in between. So really understanding that. and then, kind of going to the next step of documentation collection, corporate documents, things like that, lab tests. And we try to move very quickly in reviewing everything. I will share this, most of the time when customers get to me, they've already been shut down or turned down by 2 or 3 other banks at that point.
Why is that typically?
Well, the national size banks are not openly participating with any type of cannabis banking at all. Why is it so hard in banking? There's risk. It is still considered a high-risk industry because of the percentage being the only thing that determines its legality, and also reputation. Some banks do not want to be associated with anything that's cannabis-related, and so they just, if customers are banking through them, they'll just shut it down.
Do they ever come to you and share with you some of the feedback that the national banks give them on why they've been denied or what they told them are some of the challenges internally?
They do, and I'm a lot more sympathetic for people because I've met a lot of people in the industry from all different industries, doctors, attorneys, engineers, and they don't understand how hard it is in banking because they'll get all their ducks in a row and then they get to the banking piece and that's the biggest, hurdle. And so I understand that people they're scrutinized by other banks, they're made to feel like they're doing something wrong. And so I just try to, I hear all the time, wow, I'm really relieved I talked to you, or this is a breath of fresh air. And so that's what I enjoy. I enjoy helping people and helping them navigate kind of the banking landscape. And whatever it is, if it's banking, if it's payment processing, if it's lending, just kind of understanding what the model, what their business model is, what they actually need, and even future needs, because they may not need a loan right now. They may just be starting up, but it's something in the future that we can visit as they need to continue to expand.
So as you're getting to know your customers, is there like an internal playbook or checklist that you have to follow and say you're trying to find out this, this, and this? Or is it more of a fluid dialogue that you have with your prospective clients, that is?
Well, it's actually a little bit of both. So going back a little bit, so back in, I think, 2020 is when I first actually started handling CBD customers. And what happened was, we had this product, we had a CBD commercial checking account, but really building the framework of how that works. Like, what do we collect? What do we ask? What do we monitor? And so talking with a lot of people in the industry, just trying to educate myself. And I mentioned this earlier, one gentleman that was very valuable, a good friend of mine, James Johnson Jr., JJ.
Yeah, shout out to JJ.
Shout out to JJ, okay? I think he has a few nicknames out there, the Hemp Pimp and the Captain of Cannabis. I mean, there's a lot of names out there, okay?
We just talked last night, and I think I told you earlier, I already found out something a little bit different about him last night through just conversation. So, good guy.
Yeah, very good guy. And so I met him at the very beginning of kind of me handling the program, and I did so on a volunteer basis. I mean, I was just like, is anyone else going to do it? I was like, okay, I'll help.
Yeah.
And so conversations with JJ, really understanding, the legality of it, understanding what a COA is. I mean, have you ever looked at a COA?
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
What does LOQ mean, and measure of uncertainty and all those things. And as more cannabinoids come out, there's more to kind of understand and research. And so we had very good conversations in the beginning that really helped me understand what's needed compliance-wise and why these folks, why they're looking to get in the industry.
So with a new client that comes to you, how quickly do you ask for a COA as a sample to review in determining whether or not they're a viable client for you?
Well, we try to work very quickly. So after an initial conversation, we'll send them a checklist of documents we need to review. So we do have an internal matrix that I helped create and design, just understanding the industry.
I think that's what I was getting at, right? Is that you do have an organized fashion to say, these are the items that we need after that initial conversation. And then you send them the matrix. They look at it, COA being one of them. They send it back. Do you have a team that reviews that, or do you review it purely on your own?
Well, we have a team, so if I have questions that are above my head, I mean, I can definitely refer to, but for the most part, it comes directly to me, and I oversee the CBD and hemp banking portfolio. And so since we know what to look for, what to ask for, we do have our own matrix that I helped create. We have a policy and procedure. So we have a lot of those things in writing. So we have guidelines to go by. But usually I can get somebody reviewed and approved in a week or less, which is very quick on the banking side. Some people will wait 3 or 4 weeks and then still get a no. I like to keep the ball in the customer's court. Hey, here's what we need. Get it to me, and then we'll get the ball rolling so that they're not waiting on me. And, like I said, depending on how many packets we have to review, we can get it done as quickly as they can get all the documents that we require.
So tell me a situation where where a potential client is kind of on the fence. You're like, this is kind of risky, but I think they're a viable client. Tell me about that and how you work that out and why they may be on the fence and they could straddle either way.
That's a good question. So, part of vetting these customers and what their business nature and what they're doing and how we do it is, really understanding it. So, for example, let's say it's a retailer and they have COAs, but they don't match the products, or they're from 2021 and we need something more recent because they basically expired. So, rather than just turning them down, I'll say, hey, here's an alternative. If you can get me, 1, 2, 3 lab tests to show that it's within compliance, then we can move forward. Or missing documentation, things like that. Or, hey, you don't have the Texas license for retail hemp. We need that to proceed. So it's really if they're willing to work with us to meet those parameters, or if they're just like, well, I'm not doing that, or, then there's nothing we can really do to help them because.
So what's the conversion rate on that? Let's just say like 10 potential clients walk in, or 20. What's the conversion rate from potential client to actually turning into clients? And to your point, some of that could be just lack of organization, right? They have the products. They actually may have a viable COA, but for whatever reason, they can't get their hands on the most recent one. So that may be one of those situations where they could be a very good client, but because of lack of organization or lack of preparation, they don't become a client of yours. Just give me an idea of what the conversion rate is on that.
I mean, the conversion rate, I will have, let's just say 10 conversations a week.
Yeah.
New prospects.
Okay. Let's just say 10.
Probably 5 of those will move forward and actually providing documentation and, all the things that we need. Some people I won't hear from again. Maybe they just don't have it or don't feel like it's worth it. So it's not that we turn a lot of people down. It's if they can kind of meet our requirements to onboard them.
Okay, so they get onboarded. What are some of the more common products that they need? Is it more lending, or is it more lines of credit, or is it just like a basic operations account? What is the typical product they're seeking from you?
Typically, it's banking. They can't get just a regular business bank account.
Okay.
Because if it's, a lot of times their name is Canna or hemp this, CBD that, and any other bank that sees it, it's like a no. They could even be a nonprofit organization, and if they have it in their name, they still get shut down. So we treat it as, do they touch the plant? Are they a farmer? Are they a manufacturer? Are they a retailer? Because we have customers that are work with the industry, but they don't handle the plant at all, and we can still bank them pretty easily. We obviously don't need lab tests for that. And
there's like a tier 2, 1, 2, and 3, right? With plant touching, non-plant touching, and ancillaries.
We categorize it that way. On the hemp side, it's really, do they touch the plant or not?
Okay. Do you bank people who do touch the plant?
We do, yeah.
You do? Okay. Because I know there are some other banks out there who bank in this industry, but they specifically will only bank non-plant touching businesses.
Right.
So
we can do it all.
You can do it all. Okay. So just to be clear, Herring Bank is not only doing hemp, but let's say if I was somebody that's associated with a state-sponsored medical cannabis program, that the product is not technically defined as hemp, and I come to you, do you say, here, talk to this person internally, or how is that handled?
Well, we have a whole program for that. We have a whole department of compliance people, so it'd be a warm introduction. If the state has a legalized licensing program, then we can certainly help them. So we have people in that department. I said, hey, here's so-and-so, give them a call and we work very quickly to collect what we need and get them onboarded.
But based on what you've seen, that's that side experiences more challenges, heavily more regulated, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of regulation. There's a lot of monitoring that goes on. What people don't understand is banks have to staff for that compliance part. And so what also keeps some of the banks out of the industry is just the staffing that it requires to maintain that program as it grows. Because once you tell people you're doing CBD, hemp, cannabis, I mean, everybody's coming to you. And so our focus has just been getting the word of mouth out that we work with customers in this industry. We're happy to bank them, and we can do it in a way that's compliant with what's required of us.
Okay. Are there any type of clients you prefer working with more, like retailers versus farmers who are cultivating hemp? Do you have a preference?
I don't know that I have a preference. I have farmers, I have manufacturers, I have retailers. I probably see more retailers.
Okay.
Just because there's more people that are not actually involved in the cultivating part of it. Mm-hmm. They're just more or less, they've taken a CBD products, it's impacted their life. Now they want to get into business. I see more retailers, but I appreciate the farmers. I mean, I love asking them questions about their cultivation process and learning. I ask a lot of questions of people in the industry, and that's how I learn.
Yeah. No, I'm sure it's a ongoing learning process, right? As the industry blossoms and matures, things will change. At Herring Bank, is there beyond the internal compliance committee, or the entire internal compliance team, which I've actually spoken with a couple of them at Herring Bank? Do you have a team, or is it maybe you that tracks the legislation that could impact the banking industry, such as the Safe Banking Act, when it's, as you and I both know, it's been approved by the House 7 times, it never came to fruition. But is there somebody internally that tracks that kind of stuff?
Yeah, we as a team, we monitor bills that could pass or affect the industry. I myself do a lot of the monitoring on the CBD and hemp side because, as you know, it's not just the Farm Bill; it's individual states. I mean, they can they can regulate cannabinoids, they can regulate limits of milligrams, licensing requirements. I think there's 6 or 7 states that require an actual license just to sell CBD. Not all states do. So I work to keep informed on updates in the industry. I mean, I would say this year, based on what we're seeing, there's a lot of states that are going to pass additional legislation on what's allowed in their state, which would impact the industry on what they can and can't do or sell. There's the potential of the 2023 Farm Bill, which could regulate everything. So one of the things I take pride in is keeping up with those regulatory things that are published. Also, the DEA will publish letters from time to time clarifying what is considered a controlled substance or not. So, I work to stay informed. I monitor a lot of things and keep up with folks in the industry that also post that. So it's challenging, but it's fun. Right. I like that it's always changing, and I'm always learning.
You see the DEA's most recent post or their position on THCO being synthetic? Because there's their position is there's not a trace of it versus, say, Delta 8 THC. There are traces of Delta 8 in the hemp plant itself, but THCO is purely synthetic. So their position is that, unlike Delta 8 THC, which has been litigated through the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, THCO is synthetically based, and therefore they're taking an adverse position on it. Yeah, I don't know if you
I
saw
did.
that.
Yeah, we keep up with any publication like that with the DEA. They'll publish things about Delta 8 or even cannabis seeds in general, and so we kind of follow their interpretation of it. And so, the THCO, they even posted a picture of the molecule saying, hey, this doesn't ever happen in the plant, so it's not protected by the Farm Bill. And so we informed all of our customers, hey, this can't be sold. If you're selling it, it needs to be removed immediately. Things like that happen. One day, I mean, you're investing and buying all these products, and then something comes out and it's not legal.
Right.
So I think.
So what's it like closing down an account? You just say, hey, you're going to close down your account, or you have to. Here's a cure period, and if you don't cure it, then we'll shut you down.
Yeah.
What is that conversation?
Well, we work
like?
with customers and say, hey, based on this information, publication, or change in state law, you're going to have to follow these procedures to stay in compliance. And so we work with people, give them a time frame, and if a lot of times they're just willing to work with us, and we'll get it situated. If somebody's just absolutely like not paying attention, doesn't care, then there's nothing we can do. Like, we have to stay in compliance as a bank, and we work to stay in compliance with the industry.
Right. And so closing down an account, do you just close them down and send them back their money, or what is that process like, and how long does it take if you had to shut down an account?
If I had to shut down an account, I mean, we'd send them a letter, notification. I mean, I really try to talk with the customer and get them, on the same page of what we need to be. If they absolutely just can't respond, then we'll just close their account, send them a cashier's check, and wish them well.
That must be tough. I mean, that must be the worst feeling in the world if you're on the business side getting your account shut down. So
it is, and I'd say this. I mean, it's pretty hard to get your account shut down with us. You just have to just not be following kind of the same rules that everybody else has to follow. Because we bank a lot of people in a lot of different aspects of the industry. We're not afraid of it. But these are the parameters that we have to follow as a bank, and that, we know the industry standards are.
Yeah.
And so we educate people. We say, hey, did you know this posted? And try to keep up. We try to stay ahead of our customers, even with regulators, and really keep up to date with what's being passed.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about lending. Do you actually perform any lending to any of the cannabis businesses?
We can do lending on the CBD and hemp side. It's going to be the same requirements. Now, I'm not a lender, so I can't speak to underwriting, but we don't discriminate based on it being CBD or hemp related. We're not like, okay, you're hemp, we can't lend to you, because we understand it's been federally legalized. So it's really, among the things of asking for financials, proof of the ability to pay it back. So back in 2008, when the whole recession was hitting, I was in the middle of that, just starting as a banker. And, in those days, it was stated income, and it was, you have $100,000 line of credit, and it was, people didn't flinch about that. Now banks are required to show that the customer meets that ability to repay. And so, people think that if a bank turns them down, that we're just the bad guys. But it's like, no, we're trying to protect you long term, that you can pay the loan back. So we can do it. It just depends on the nature of the business situation.
Okay. So what type of assets do you guys usually use as a form of collateral that you may put a lien on?
Typically, we can do anything with real estate, vehicles, certain types of equipment. We can't use crops, and we can't use retail products. It's got to be something physically tangible.
Okay, so just to be clear, you cannot actually say, I'm going to use your inventory or use some of your finished products as a form of collateral for the lending purposes.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. The reason I point that out is because I can see people in the industry trying to get a loan and say, well, I have collateral. I have very valuable isolates, right? Or I have very valuable whatever products. But I would think, and I'm not a banker, is that you can't really look at inventory, but you may be able to look at equipment, right, as a tangible asset that could be a potential form of collateral.
Yeah, that's correct. We can use other forms of collateral to help fund the loan, and one thing that's kind of overlooked is sometimes people have cash in the bank, they don't want to use it. We can even do a CD secured loan and just borrow off themselves, and as they pay it back at the very end, they get their money back. We release the hold from the CD. So that's another avenue that we can explore. It's easier than, like, let's say real estate loan, but I mean we have different tools that we use to try to help people get what they need.
Can you use real estate as well?
We can.
Okay. So real estate, some non-inventory tangible assets, let's just say, i.e., equipment, or like a CD secure loan, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Does management ever get involved and say, no, we can't lend to these guys, even though they have all their financials and they have the right collateral? Is there like an overriding mechanism up top that says,
I don't know that there is. I think I would say that we're fair on our assessment of underwriting. we don't discriminate and say, well, this person, we're going to decline it for this reason.
Sure.
It would have to make sense just overall on our lending business model.
Okay. Let's transition a little bit away from the bank. Let's talk about the industry itself. Clearly Herring Bank is, at least my understanding in Texas, it's kind of a trailblazer in the banking industry for cannabis. But how do you see the banking industry change and evolve over time in cannabis in the next, say, 2 to 3 years?
Well, I mean, I think that it is continuing to grow. I mean, people are still getting involved in cultivating or even retail. And as far as the changes that I see, I mean, I don't know if you saw what happened in the Texas House about changing the teacup parameters, and things like that can happen.
Yeah, I think I posted something on LinkedIn.
I think you did. Yeah. I'm always on LinkedIn because I'm always keeping up with the news updates, and so that has the potential to open up more on the full cannabis side in Texas. Okay. I think a lot of people are eyeing that. Also if Texas passes further amendments to the farm, to their own version for hemp, that's yet to be seen. So we definitely keep our eyes on that. We have to be versatile to adjust with the industry because a state can pass a law, they can do it on a national level, and we have to be ready to adjust to work with our customers and inform them of the requirements. So what do I see upcoming? I mean, there's a lot of talks about a lot of bills and a lot of things, and really it's just understanding that things can change and being ready to work with our customers and inform them of anything that the state decides.
Yeah, I can only imagine the industry, how it's shifted so much over the last, I would say, 4 years, because at the beginning it was a lot of CBD driven businesses, right? Everything was CBD, CBD, CBD. But as the industry has evolved and matured and changed, then you're looking at Delta 8 cannabinoids, Delta 10, hemp-derived Delta 9, HHC, and all these other products that's available on the open market. Has that presented a challenge, or has that presented any type of concern for the banks? Because with CBD, it was more, we'll just say call it wellness driven, in the sense that people eventually learned that CBD didn't have a psychoactive reaction. But these other cannabinoids, they do, right? They're still, according to certain sources, they're still federally legal. But has that shifted your outlook or your bank's approach on banking hemp products?
Well, it does affect our bank's approach because we're going to follow not just the Farm Bill, but state regulatory guidances on cannabinoids. Let's just say cannabinoids. And so, what might not be legal in Colorado and California as far as the definition of legal hemp products, it might be okay in Texas. It might be okay in Florida. But a state can have their session and they can pass rules. They can put, restrictions on milligrams per package for THC. They can put restrictions on certain cannabinoids. They can say, hey, we're going to consider total THC. So really,
certain packeging requirements, certain warning labels on the packaging.
Yeah, and you're more familiar with the labeling, so anybody getting in this industry needs a good cannabis attorney, and so.
Oh, thanks. I'll tell you what; those projects are a bear to deal with. I've had several clients that want to do a 50-state survey, whether they're selling a beverage or a candy or some other product, and their goal is to sell it nationwide. And so, my team and we would have to do these extensive research projects and create like this matrix and this grid saying, well, these states have these type of restrictions. And I'm still, I shouldn't be shocked, but I'm always surprised by how many differences there are from state to state, right? And sometimes even differences between Delta 8 THC that's hemp derived and Delta 9. Sometimes that's even different.
Yeah, that's very interesting. It's funny because you see the other side of that, their actual packaging, branding, what they can do. And that's what makes the industry challenging. It's different from state to state. It's possible that Congress will pass something this year. Maybe FDA will get regulate the whole industry. I'm all for regulation. I'm all for everyone playing by the same rules and being fair. but it's kind of the Wild West right now. It's like state to state, and it's challenging, but it's interesting. It's really having to stay informed. And so, as you mentioned, your labels and different products. What's something that you've seen that was challenging or interesting just on your end?
Well, just sometimes the definition of how they define packaging, or if it's like a single serving or if it's like a package. Like sometimes certain states will have a definition of package of, say, 2 items or more, right? That's a package. So in theory, if that's the case, a package, you can put 3 items in there, package it up. That's 1 serving, right? Or that's 1 package. But then you technically have 3 different servings. So I think I'm saying it right, that you have 3 different servings, but 1 package. And then they may have a restriction saying per package, you cannot have in excess of, we'll just call it 50 mgs of Delta 9 THC. That's a limit. Mm-hmm. Well, in a bordering state, you can have up to 100. But then that state may only have a population of X, whereas the more restrictive state has a population of Y that's substantially more. Then it becomes a business decision on which targeted audience or which targeted market am I going to focus more on? And what's the overhead on that? What's the cost of getting my products into that state? Are there any other licensure or regulatory issues that I have to manage while being in that state versus this state? Is it close enough where the neighboring state can go over to that state and bring it back? Right?
See, that's interesting. That's why I say that if people are going to get in the industry, they need a good attorney to understand all that, because you can be in Texas where everything's fine and dandy, and then you have a customer in Colorado, but what you're selling it's not legal for possession there. So.
Yeah, and Colorado is a very restrictive state. California is a very restrictive state. And I don't want to rattle this off the top of my head. It's either Delta 8 or Delta 9. I'm pretty sure it's Delta 9 THC. In the state of Vermont, it's flat out prohibited. So I had to tell my client, you can't sell it in Vermont. And then certain states will have different labeling or warning labels. Sometimes it's a yellow triangle with an exclamation point. Sometimes it's a yellow triangle with an exclamation point that says warning on the bottom, right? Those little nuances of creating those little warning labels that's compliant with that particular state. And then the question then becomes for a business is, are you going to make 50 different labels? Or are you going to make 1 label that contains all this stuff? So there are some considerations you have to make, and then some states have warning requirements for pregnancy. Some states don't.
Yeah, see, that gets a bit more complicated. We focus on the potency, on the COA, on the just what it contains. Mm-hmm. But on the sales side, I mean, all that's required, and that's why. And
there's a transportation aspect of it, right? If you take a certain route, what type of exposure do you have, whether it's taxes or whether it's just potential enforcement action. So, I mean, the market's really funny depending on which state you're in. I still have, obviously I'm not going to name his name, but I still have a client that I recall. He had the most interesting situation to come up in Oklahoma. Now, granted, this person was driving down the highway with, a duffel bag full of cash. So that's not, that can be kind of risky, but some of the stories I hear are pretty wild.
Yeah. So. It's very interesting. Even from a banking aspect, I mean, I've made a lot of friends over the years, different banks I've worked with, and I don't know anybody that does what I do. Mm-hmm. I mean, to work with the cannabis industry, to work with CBD and hemp is pretty rare. Mm-hmm. So I always have conversations with folks. Oh yeah, this is what I do. And they're, well, what's that like?
Yeah.
It's typically banking, lending, treasury management, things like that. So I'm still in the banking industry, but I just get this really interesting, fun part to work with, I guess you could say.
And you've probably seen this as well, is that the industry is changing so fast. I mean, now we're looking at hemp fiber, we're looking at different materials. So now you're dealing with a slightly different demographic with industrial hemp, right? And then now there are even more and more, I don't know if you've come across this with, biopharmaceuticals or companies that's making product that's more medically driven through hemp cannabinoids, because they're finding out new research all the time with different forms of minor cannabinoids and even major cannabinoids with CBG inducing, different types of anti-inflammatory effects, or CBN that's inducing better sleep, whatever, right? I'm not a botanist or a chemist, but my point is that I think we barely scratched the surface on a lot of this stuff, and I think with that you're going to see new products out there, which I think it'll impact me, it'll impact you, and how you approach it. But I'm curious to know, in your opinion, what geographical markets do you see as the next big growth in banking needs?
Geographically, now we're always focused on, the states that we bank in, which is Texas. We also have branches in Colorado and Oklahoma, so we have our footprint there. I think when Texas kind of is a big market in the industry, I think. And so really watching how they regulate it, what opens up, even changes with the Compassion Act, I think that can really grow the industry. I mean, watching surrounding states like New Mexico and Mississippi, the program, or Oklahoma, the programs they have.
Right.
I'm all for for legalization and regulatory framework just to keep everyone safe and open it up for a lot of business opportunity here.
It'll be interesting to see how this legislative session turns out, because we're about a month away before session ends. And of course, you've already mentioned a few bills, and I know a few that's being considered right now in the Texas Congress right now. But so what's next for Herring Bank? Any future strategies on how to continuing growth internally and in this industry?
Well, we're continuing to grow just by building relationships. Letting people know who we are, what we're able to do. We have a very good reputation in the industry. I mean, I don't
attending more Lucky Lease.
Well, whatever events pop up locally, I like to show my face and meet people. But really, just sometimes magazine articles, sometimes just working with partners in general that'll say, hey, my client or my friend or my brother can't find a bank. Can you guys help him? And, I always ask the question, how did you hear about Herring Bank?
I saw you on the Observer one time.
Did you?
Yeah, it was a big cover. It was it was a full body shot.
Yeah, it's funny. I find myself in different places. I think we were in the Texas Hemp Reporter also.
Okay.
We had an article there. And then I asked people, where'd you hear about us? And they're like, oh, we Googled you. And so, just having strategies so that, when people look us up, they'll find we're a hemp-friendly bank.
You better up that SEO, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, let's wrap up. And I just want to say, thank you for making the time to come down to the studio. And I think we certainly touched on some really interesting topics within the banking industry. It continues to be a challenge, right? I'm hoping that one day we don't have some of these challenges within the industry, especially for banking, because I know there are a lot of businesses that need people like you and need the Herring Banks of the world. So any last minute comments?
Well, I appreciate what I get to do for a living. I appreciate working with people. I like helping people. And by the time they get to me, they're kind of desperate. They're kind of discouraged. They're frustrated. And I like being able to turn that situation around and really help them launch their dream business. Like, they just want to get in the industry. And so I appreciate it. So, getting the word out on who we are, what I do for the bank, I think is beneficial for the bank to grow, but also for customers that can't find a partner to work with in this industry on the financial side. So our strategy is to continue to grow. We'll grow and we'll work with people, even as regulatory challenges come up. We work with the industry. And, it's fun. I'll say that. It's very interesting to get to do what I do.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Andrew, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. It's great to be on your show. I've watched a few episodes, and it's exciting to be here.
Well, thank you. All right. Well, thanks for coming down, and we'll talk soon.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.